Hello, and welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at the new House Bill 219, which is set to go up to vote today, March 18th. And this is actually a live stream I recorded from the Congress itself. We're going to skip through it and talk about some of the key points that they are focusing on and some of the key concerns that were brought up by the Senate, and discuss a little bit further in detail the answers that were put into place. But without further ado, let's get started on it. I will be skipping around in the video just a bit because I'm not going to make you sit through almost an hour worth of Senate questions and answers, but we are going to highlight the key points. If you do want the full breakdown, I will have links to the recording in the comments below. But let's go ahead and get started.
And I just want to highlight three things for the committee on why they should pass this bill. This property was acquired through LWCF, meaning it should already be open to the public. Opening the state park would provide easier and safer access for us in Doña Ana County to access our public lands. And lastly, this wetland state park would contribute to the health of our river down in southern New Mexico. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Zoe Barker. I'm the Conservation Director with CB&M, and Kyla did a really good job explaining some of the benefits of this state park in Doña Ana County. I'll just add that state parks have a lot of economic and other health benefits to communities that they're in. So we urge the committee to support this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi there, Camilla Feibelman with the Sierra Club, also in support of the bill. Our members and supporters are inspired to protect nature by visiting it. So we have dozens and dozens of volunteer excursions, leaders, and participants in southern New Mexico who like to go out on outings and see what our public lands have to offer us, but we have to be able to access them. So please vote yes.
Alright, so the first little part there was just kind of introduction of the bill and talking about some of the key features. That is why we are even introducing this bill in the first place. And being from this general vicinity in New Mexico, I've personally hiked around in the area that is proposed for this state park. But let's take a look at the bill itself and the legislation, specifically the map. Now, this was introduced on the 29th of January. And if we scroll down here to the bottom of this, and I will have all links in the comments or in the description below. But as you can see, the proposed area for the park is going to be right here. And this is right off of, if you're familiar with the area, a well-known hiking loop trail called Slot Canyon. And it's also pretty close to the Lordsburg State Park, right along the Rio Grande. But this orange area is going to be the proposed area. And let me zoom in on this a little bit so we can take a look. As you can see, this little dotted line right here is going to indicate that loop trail I was talking about. It's not part of the park, but it is going to be in adjacent to the park. Now, the proposed kind of overall setting of this is this area right here down by the river is going to be converted into a more modern style campground area where you're going to have the ticketing booth to camp there and for day use and all of the different passes and things like that, as well as proposed possible hookups for RVs and tent camping in the area. Now, this is going to make it a little bit more accessible for everybody and overall allow for an easier time getting into this public land. Right now, in order to get to the Slot Canyon Trail, for instance, there is a gate. You have to park right there on the side of the road and then climb over a gated fence in order to go hiking out there. This is proposing kind of opening that up and allowing us to get onto those lands with a little bit more ease. They are also going to start setting up conservation areas for the riparian wetlands that we have in the area to help better improve the overall river health of the Rio Grande. And this is kind of what the proposed is going to look at. This is about, I believe they say in the thing, about 900 acres, The bill itself says 700 and something, which we'll take a look at here in a second. So it is still a pretty big area, but it is all on state-owned land, so it's not going to be cutting into any private property or anything like that, as was mentioned kind of in the introduction there. That being said, the next talking point I want to kind of jump to is going to be the geological area here. But let me find it on the video. There we go.
I too have some question regarding public safety factor. I've been told that whenever there is an event, we've seen it happen out there west of Roswell. There is a public safety concern. Whenever there is an event, all of a sudden that can come down and it can wash the like I can't believe. So my concern there is, and I've been contacted by a few people in regard to this, do you not see that being a problem as far as the flooding of that particular area and the potential loss of lives on them not being able to escape?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. Great to see you as well. Rain and water, I think we always have to have a very healthy respect for, no doubt about it. Madam Chair, Senator, the Slot Canyon in this case is not nearly as long as many that you would see in other parts, or say like in Arizona or Utah, or maybe in other parts of northern New Mexico. Madam Chair, Senator, I think as we go through the development, I know Mr. Velasquez is here from State Parks. It'll be a couple of year deal. The focus for getting people is going to be on the east side of Highway 185. The Slot Canyon itself is on the west side of the highway there. All of the sort of the development will be there on the east side, which is pretty close to the river, where there's levees and a bunch of other stuff. So I don't worry too much about the flooding at the river itself. And I think your concern and Senator Townsend's concern, really making sure there's a robust way that folks are notified and have awareness, I think that can be built in. Right now, Madam Chair, Senator Ezell, there's a number of folks who are using that area from both nearby and also that come from farther away. And so I think we're only going to make the situation safer with this development.
So kind of like what he was saying there, as we saw in the map itself, the Slot Canyon is over here on the west side, and most of the development, like I said, is going to be along the river. So that's kind of what he's talking about for that. We also here in New Mexico have a notification system. Like today's a perfect example. It is super windy in Las Cruces area, and my phone gives me an alert every time extreme winds are going to be detected. The same thing is true for potential flash floods, and this specific area does have relatively good cell phone coverage, so it's pretty rare to not get those notifications, even if you are out there in the wilderness. So I don't personally think there's going to be a huge cause for concern. That, and if we take a look at kind of the geographic of it here on Google Earth, this is the Slot Canyon right here, so we could zoom in on it, and it is not very long. It goes from maybe a quarter of a mile at most from the beginning of where you can see the runoff kind of spreads out all the way up to the very beginning of the canyon, and even the canyon itself is super small. Now, that doesn't mean flash floods can't happen there, and it does happen periodically, but we do have agencies in place to monitor the rainfall and give early warning to anybody that may be out in this area. But the proposed part of the park itself, is going to be kind of down here, where we don't get the same interaction. We don't see all of this river runoff. It doesn't go that far due to anti-flood measures that are already in place. Now, they are also planning on including the Swan Lake area right here. So if we look back at the other map, they say Swan Pond, sorry, not lake. It's going to be another area where that water can drain off before it has a chance to get to the campsite area. So it's going to be kind of like a reservoir, not so much, but it does have that space right here to prevent some of that torrential like downpour from getting it through and knocking out the housing and everything like that. But that is what he was referring to when we talked about it being further up on the west side. So even if there is floodwaters that come through, which there will be, it's not going to impact people that are at the campgrounds. As for people hiking and stuff, like I said, early warning monitoring systems, park staff can help with the warning. The overall trail, if we go back to it, here is about 2.5 miles or so, and it's a loop. So it's not a large trail. And the only part that's not really accessible by an ATV in an emergency situation would be the canyon. They could drive all the way up to the canyon, but they can't get into it. So I don't foresee this being a major safety concern. Another concern is brought up later in the video, but I'm actually going to skip that point because personally it's not a concern, is immigration. Now, yes, people are crossing the border illegally. We do know that. This area itself is close to a checkpoint, first of all, for Border Patrol. And secondly, it's not a well-traversed area in that region for that kind of thing. But I'm not going to focus too much on that because this is more for conservation. That is a concern that is brought up, though, and I wanted to kind of just highlight it. Now, the next point of concern, we jump to it here, is the connecting to an already proposed bill, which was House Bill 563. And that was the introduction of what's called the Rio Grande Trail. It is a through hike trail designed for biking, long distance hiking, and equestrian that has been proposed in, I believe, 2015. And it stretches all the way from the New Mexico border near Texas, El Paso region, all the way up to Colorado. And they're going to talk briefly about that.
Mr. Velasquez, you said you operated how many state parks in New Mexico?
Madam Chair and Senator, 35.
35. And how many of them are below the interstate that runs east-west?
Madam Chair, Senator, I missed that question.
South of I-40, how many state parks are there in the state of New Mexico, south of I-40?
Madam Chair, without being able to count in my mind, about half.
Okay. And Madam Chair, do you want me to go in and tell you what those are? Because I do know them. No, I'm not going to do that, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this.
And Chairman Small and Senator Steinborn. I'm assuming that there would be, Madam Chair, I want to tie this into a bill that Senator Steinborn carried many years ago whenever he was on the House, the bike trail. Is this going to be tied into that bike trail that you got the funding for many years ago? And I can't remember how long ago that's been, Senator Steinborn. You have it?
Madam Chair, it's the Rio Grande Trail.
Okay.
And yes, this would be right along the Rio Grande Trail. It'd be, I think, a destination of the trail, too.
Okay, well, Madam Chair, I guess that brings me to my question for Senator Steinborn. Originally, this bill was going to come from our southern border, going up through Las Cruces, follow the Rio Grande. And where was it to end, and what is the status of that trail right now?
Madam Chair, Senator, it's 500-plus mile trail. It goes all the way to Colorado, Texas to Colorado, through New Mexico, roughly along the Rio Grande. And the statuses are about 100 miles. They've designated about 100 miles, and now we created a commission as the modality, and so the commission has gone through changes through the years. They've got a great new commission appointed. They've got a meeting in TRC here in a few months. We've got about 100 miles of trail ready to be designated. So I think we're about to see a surge of progress on the Rio Grande Trail, which is really great to see.
Okay, and Madam Chair, refresh my memory, Senator Steinborn. What was the cost of that? I can't remember.
Well, Madam Chair, there's really no cost of it outside of the management of the commission itself, which was costing us about $75,000 a year. Now we've kind of shifted that money into planning. That planning dollars is shifted to the outdoor recreation division, which we didn't have at the time, and so they are now doing the active planning of it, which is really where the work is. It's in the day-to-day coordination with communities and planning of trail segments.
Senator,
Okay, so I just want to kind of pause it there. So there was two big talking points. The first was the Rio Grande Trail, which in the image we saw for the designated area is actually running right along the Rio Grande. In this general area, you can see it follows the Rio Grande. It goes up, and again, from El Paso all the way up to Denton, or up to Colorado. So really long through hike trail. Only about 100 miles of it or so has been designated. Like you said, there's about 100 getting ready to be designated. That's going to open up. Most of it is in the Las Cruces region and the Albuquerque region. We're still working on kind of connecting the dots. There's a lot of private land and things like that we have to work with our shareholders and our stakeholders to overall put all of that together. And I am going to try to catch that meeting in TRC. I don't know exactly when it is. I'll have to do a little bit of research, and I will make a video on that as well if I was able to catch it, or at least find it recorded somewhere. And then, of course, the financial cost. This is always going to be a big concern anytime we are bringing anything to legislation. And with the financial cost here, I do have a fiscal impact report. This is not a complete overall budget, but this is going to be the general operating budget that we expect. Now, this year there's not going to be any fiscal impact because this has not passed, it has not been put into effect. But in 2026 and 2027, you could see they are estimating $398,000 as kind of the operating cost. That is paying the employees, maintaining the trails, all of that kind of stuff that you would normally see with any sort of state park. Now, if we take a look at the breakdown here, you can see that this funding is going to be coming from the general funds that is part of our energy, minerals, and natural resource department. So a lot of it coming from the solar, the oil, those kind of departments, the funds that are put together as a whole for the state for general funding is going to be where the $9 million comes from. Now, they also mention in later parts of the Senate that they're expecting it to take 2 years before the trails are accessible, and then maybe 2 to 3 years for them to finish building the campsite and the campground area. So an overall turnaround of 5 years getting everything kind of put together. But whenever it comes to that reoccurring funding, we're not expecting it to go up, at least with a significant branch. Plus, this is also going to bring in a lot of chances for the local area to jump on ecotourism or agricultural tourism, where you have the chili farms and some ranching areas in the area that could then set up B&Bs or set up personal businesses to help bring economic growth to this area. So it does have a lot of benefits, and the revenue and park fees should, as you can see here, projected to bring up to almost $6 million. So once everything's kind of set up, we can expect to see a return on investment. And this area, people travel here already quite frequently for hiking and bird watching and things like that. So just adding it a place where they can kind of come in, be safe, and experience the wonders of the Land of Enchantment does help with the overall revenue. Now, there are some concerns. There are legitimate concerns brought up throughout the Senate hearing, but at the end of this, they did vote. It was a 5-3 vote for this to go through. So as of today, it did pass the Senate. Now it is going to have to go into the governor, make sure there's no amendments that need to be needed, and then from there we can determine whether or not it'll get signed in, or if they will do anything with this project. But that is it. That is House Bill 219 that went to Senate today on March 18th. If you do have any questions for me or want me to elaborate just a little bit further on anything in this, like I said, I will have all of the links to these bills so you can read them yourself. You can also watch the full video and give me some comments. What do you think? Personally, I'm on the fence about this. While I like the idea of having a state park designated in that area, it does open up to tourism and the negatives that come with tourism. So there has to be a lot of cleaning and maintenance there. And this is one of those areas where I really enjoy kind of going out and hiking and taking photos in general. So I'm interested to see how this will tie into preserving the environment and conservation. They do mention in the House bill some things that they're going to try to do. So first and foremost, they are going to try to add trails and maximize the recreational activities in the area, which is going to be nice. Having easy access is something that we should have for all state lands. Not necessarily turning them all into campgrounds and things like that, but being able to get to the trails and go out and hiking should be something that is considered for these areas. Of course, connecting its current trails to existing trails, including the Rio Grande Trail, which we just discussed. Complete the natural resource management plan. And one of the big ones is salt cedar. Salt cedar is a very impactful species that lives alongside the riverside with current water concerns. Removing as much of this as we can is going to help overall. So there's a lot to this bill. It's a very short little bill to kind of set up the start and protection of this area. But that is it. I will talk to you next time.